We are beset by many terrible foes in these dark times, but we walk in the light of the Emperor, and we shall not let a single foe stay us from our duty. We are the sisters of the great ecclesiarchy, and we will fight to the bitter end. From Canoness Palmiro. The Order of the Ebon Chalice is one of the major orders militant of the Adepta Sororitas, or the Sisters of Battle. The order was founded in honor of Saint Alicia Dominica herself by the Ecclesiarch Alexis XXII in the 36th millennium, when the Convent Sanctorum was split between the convents on Ophelia 7 and Terra, founding the orders of the Ebon Chalice, the Valorous Heart, the Fiery Heart, and the Argent Shroud. Like all of humanity, the Order of the Ebon Chalice has been faced with untold horrors since the Great Rift opened at the start of the era Indomitus. Alongside their allies of old, the Adeptus Custodes, Space Marines, and Adeptus Mechanicus, the spiritual descendants of Dominica fight to keep the unleashed forces of chaos from overwhelming the Segmentum Solar. The Sisters have eradicated several warbands of Chaos Space Marines, most notably the Blades of the Despoiler, a cornered host of the Black Legion whose path of slaughter was headed directly for Terra. And yet, the Ebon Chalice has also taken heavy losses. Though the Schola Progenium proffers a constant stream of new recruits, only the most promising are accepted into the order, and of those, only a small percentage prove themselves in the grueling initiation rites to become Battle Sisters. This has left the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice straining against the sheer weight of the heretical incursions, but they are far from broken. Each is an expert in the ancient forms of battle established by the Daughters of the Emperor, a warrior who has mastered both their weaponry and their faith. Those who prove themselves worthy enough to rise to the rank of Celestian or Zephyrim are amongst the most skilled veterans in the entire Adepta Sororitas. The most honored of these sisters are even entrusted with a portion of the hallowed truth learned by their matriarch in the Chamber of the Golden Throne. The Order's history. Darkness has descended upon us, but the light of the Emperor still burns bright. We shall not falter in our duty or in our faith, and the enemies of the Ecclesiarchy shall be consumed by our fury. We are the spiritual descendants of Dominica, and we shall fight to the last. From Canoness El Sayan. The Order of the Ebon Chalice is the oldest of the Orders militant, founded at the birth of the Adepta Sororitas by Saint Alicia Dominica herself. The Order was created at the decree of Ecclesiarch Alexis XXII, the long-lived successor of the great reformer Sebastian Thor, in the 38th millennium, when the Convent Prioris was split between the convents on Ophelia 7 and Terra into two separate orders militant. Both of these convents are massive fortresses, housing tens of thousands of sisters of many different orders. The Convent Prioris was divided between the Order of the Ebon Chalice, whose founder was Dominica, and the Order of the Argent Shroud, led by Silvana. The Convent Sanctorum was separated into the Order of the Fiery Heart, led by Catherine and the Order of the Valorous Heart, led by Lucia. Though all these orders of battle sisters could trace their origins back to the original teachings of the Daughters of the Emperor, a small degree of variance in terms of organization and combat doctrine began to manifest as the outlook and persona of the founding matriarchs asserted itself. By the late 36th millennium, the Adepta Sororitas had become synonymous with the power of the ecclesiarchy, implementing its religious dogma and prosecuting its wars across the galaxy. The Order's militants spread, establishing subsidiary convents on key worlds across the Imperium. Dominica, Catherine, Silvana and Lucia, all of whom had been declared living saints in their own lifetimes, performed legendary acts and led their orders in countless bloody victories. Under the guidance of their matriarch, the Ebon Chalice quickly established itself as the exemplar against which all other orders would be measured. Dominica herself served as the military and spiritual head of the Adepta Sororitas. The Sisters of the Order displayed spiritual and martial discipline that was second to none, with their fortitude in battle matched only by the depth of their faith. In their training and on the field of war, they clung unerringly to the doctrines laid out by the Daughters of the Emperor, with the only adaptations being those that incorporated the use of modern Imperial weaponry and armor. A desire to emulate the perfection of Alicia Dominica burned in the heart of every sister of the Ebon Chalice. Dominica repeatedly showed herself to be the God Emperor's most worthy champion, displaying her strength, constancy, and tactical acumen across myriad war zones. While other orders battled the faithless in the distant reaches of the Imperium, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice dedicated themselves to safeguarding the sanctity of Terra and the Segmentum Solar. Planet by planet, system by system, the Order expanded their parish, rooting out cults buried deep in the bowels of hive worlds and eradicating mutant conclaves that were infesting barren moons and isolated outposts. Shrine worlds that had long ago fallen to Xenos invasions were besieged by waves of chanting warriors. Wherever the servants of chaos were found, they were met with damning oaths and cleansing flames. As they brought more territories under their care, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice were able to expose scores of planetary governors and Astra Militarum officers whose practices did not conform to the exact letter of the Imperial Creed. Preachers and confessors were called upon to make examples of the unrighteous, and where such efforts to enforce true faith were met with resistance, the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice marched forth to purge the impure. No sinner was safe under the exacting gaze of Dominica's order. After several centuries of faithful service to the Emperor and her order, Alicia Dominica was martyred, falling in combat during the scouring of Fried Wide's world. Not since the passing of Sebastian Thor himself had the bell tower of the ecclesiastical palace tolled so dolefully. Her martyrdom left a gaping void in the organization of the Adepta Sororitas, for none amongst the ranks consider themselves worthy to follow in her hallowed footsteps. Eventually, Sister Palmyra, a Dialogus of the Order of the Holy Word, was chosen by her peers as the most suitable to take over from the fallen matriarch and become abbess of the Adepta Sororitas. She accepted, but not before solemnly expressing that she could never hope to equal her predecessors' faith, vision, or fortitude. It was this humility that made her the obvious choice, for to serve the Sororitas, the Ecclesiarchy, and the Emperor in Dominica's stead was regarded not as a mark of honor, but as the undertaking of a grave and thankless responsibility. Here are some of their most notable campaigns. The Fall of Bellatis 4, from 143 to 151 M41. Faced with the planetary death at the hands of Abaddon the Despoiler Planet Killer warship, the Imperium is forced to abandon the world of Bellatis 4. Even as key units and assets are withdrawn, cultists hiding amongst the population rise up against the servants of the Emperor, sparking a widespread and desperate struggle for liberation. The Battle Sisters of the Order of the Ebon Chalice comport themselves with skill, courage, and honor, successfully evacuating numerous key ecclesiarchy officials and recovering several irreplaceable relics before departing upon the last transport to leave Bellatis 4. The Magdalene Prime Civil War. In the same time frame of 143 to 151 M41. When the followers of the cult of Balthalamus plunge Magdalene Prime into anarchy and bloodshed, the Battle Sisters of the Order of the Ebon Chalice bear the brunt of the fighting. The Order's Preceptory Reclusium is repeatedly targeted by the maddened hordes, but holds out against seemingly impossible odds until relief eventually arrives. By the time a relief force consisting of Space Marines of the Fire Angels, Sons of the Kraken, and Red Seraph's chapters arrives, the Battle Sisters have begun a determined counterattack. Victory is ultimately won. The Blood-Tide Martyrs in 876 M41. Chaos comes to the Basilica of Saint Marielle on the world of Van Horn in the shape of the bloodthirster known as the Lord of the Blood Tide. The first to oppose the demons' ravening legions are the Battle Sisters of the Order of the Ebon Chalice. But soon after battle is joined, all contact is lost with the Adepta Sororitas. The demons are eventually vanquished with the arrival of the Fourth Brotherhood of the Grey Knights. Upon the Space Marines' victory, contact with the Imperium is re-established, and it is discovered that every Battle Sister on the planet has been killed. The slain are officially elevated into the ranks of honored martyrs in the eyes of the Adepta Sororitas. The Battle of the Penitent in 938 M41. The Ebon Chalice and the Valorous Heart suffered great losses against war boss Black Axe's Orc hordes. They were eventually pushed back to the walls of the Cathedral of Saint Dufour. The attackers were held back only due to the determination and sacrifice of hundreds of Sisters Repentia. They bought enough time for the Battle Sisters to open the vast cathedral gates, and the greenskins were slaughtered shortly after by 24 penitent engines. The Promethean War in 980 M41. The Ebon Chalice reinforced the Space Marines of the Salamanders chapter who were engaged in a brutal urban war against the dread Chaos Space Marines of the Black Legion on the world of Palatine in 980 M41. The enemy was put to the torch as dozens of emulators and Land Raider Redeemers burned a path through that world's war-torn cities. Despite the strength of their forces, the advance was halted when Lord Gralastix, the demon prince leading the forces of Chaos, unleashed a legion of possessed Chaos Space Marines. As the frenzied Chaos Horde ripped through the ranks of the Imperial forces, the Battle Sisters and Space Marines fought back to back, their bolters and flamers blazing away as every warrior endeavored to sell their life dearly in the Emperor's cause. However, the Allied forces were saved when Saint Celestine appeared, falling upon the Chaos forces like an avenging angel. The living saint carved a path through the horde towards Lord Gralastix, before plunging her blade through his black heart. With his death, the forces of Chaos on the world were destroyed, but of Celestine there was no sign, for she vanished as mysteriously as she had appeared. Keepers of the Faith in M41. Dialogi of the Order of the Lexicon are called to the refinery world of Van Gogh's Folly to study a cache of ancient texts discovered deep within the planet's crust. While the sisters engage in their research, the Van Goghian Promethean barons begin speculating that the texts may constitute an account of the Emperor written during the Great Crusade. After more than a solar decade, the Dialogi report their findings to the Ecclesiarchy. Shortly after, a preceptory of the Ebon Chalice appears at Van Gogh's Folly and destroys all 4 of the planet's spaceports. Through orbital macro Lord Haler's Canoness Intolerance speaks a prayer of passing for the Promethean barons and their serfs. She then enacts Exterminatus by releasing auto-combustion pathogens into the atmosphere. The 13th Black Crusade in 999 M41. The Ebon Chalice contributed 4 preceptories to the defense of the Imperium from Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. The Indomitus Crusade in M42. Robert Guillemot, the newly instated Lord Commander of the Imperium, launches the Indomitus Crusade to save humanity from total annihilation. Through this grand campaign, he is able to reinforce the embattled Adeptus Astartes chapters, bolstering them with Primaris Space Marines. The Order of the Ebon Chalice is instrumental in the Crusade's opening maneuvers, fighting alongside Guillemot's forces to save the most strategically vital planets in the Segmentum Solar. Other orders lend their might on many of the Crusade's multiple war fronts. The Road of Martyrs in M42. The Road of Martyrs was an early battle of the Indomitus Crusade. The campaign was launched by the Crusade's fleet Tertius, which was spearheaded by Sisters of Battle forces from the Ebon Chalice and our martyred lady towards the Eye of Terror in the Segmentum Obscurus. Their dangerous assignment was to roll back chaos advances in the region that became known as the Road of Martyrs. And the War of Beasts, from 1 M42 to 25 M42. The Ebon Chalice took part in the defense of the hive world of Vigilus in the Imperium Nihilus to protect that strategic planet at one end of the Nahmund Gauntlet from assaults by Xenos and Chaos forces. Vigilus must be defended if the Imperium is to maintain the only known clear passage through the Great Rift from the Imperium Sanctus. The Relics of the Order. The Enunciation of the Creed. The traditionalists of the Order of the Ebon Chalice eagerly grasp any opportunity to apply the undeniable letter of the Imperial Creed upon the craven heretic who shirks his sentence, or the witch hiding behind her puppets. This sacred condemner bolter-gun announces their deviancy in unavoidable utterances of destructive justice. The Blade of Admonition. This blessed power sword is the very blade carried into battle by Alicia Dominica, the founding saint of the Adepta Sororitas, and was famously used to cut the head from the traitor Gorge Vanda and bring an end to the reign of blood. Saint Dominica wielded this blade in the decades following the reformation of the ecclesiarchy, and 1,000 more false prophets and heretics were slain upon its razor edge before Alicia's eventual martyrdom. And the Grail of Ages. During the Order's early wars of faith, Alicia carried the Grail of Ages with her to war. This goblet of black stone was created to be the embodiment of the matriarch's spiritual communion with the Emperor. Little is known about the Grail and the power it held. Few accounts exist of this relic's holy energy being unleashed on the battlefield, and the details they provide range between the miraculous and the heretical. Old ecclesiastical scribes wrote that when Dominica poured out the vessel's contents, the God Emperor's voice boomed, and with a single word, shattered whole armies. Well-guarded records of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica show instances in which every psyker on a planet spontaneously burst into flames when the matriarch of the Ebon Chalice carried the Grail into battle. It is believed that there are tales of the Grail of Ages within the eldritch tomes of the Black Library, and possibly even in the writhing pages of the Book of Magnus. As for the Sisters of the Ebon Chalice, they do not speak of its powers, but have always professed that the relic symbolizes their sacred duty and eternal burden, that they are the bearers of the secrets learned by Dominica before the Golden Throne, and are the vessels of the God Emperor's holy truth. This goes some way to explaining why the Order has ever sought to destroy any texts concerning the Grail, have immolated their scribes as heretics. And the Order's appearance. The vestments of the Ebon Chalice are based on the original garments worn by the Daughters of the Emperor and their combat doctrines, based on equal parts religious devotion and military training, have remained largely unchanged for 4,000 standard years. The battle sisters of this order wear black power armor covered by white vestments. The vestments have red piping and are also lined in red. The weapons of the Ebon Chalice are also often painted a deep red. The symbol of Dominica's order is the skull-filled and flaming Ebon Chalice, a representation of the terrible knowledge imparted to her when she was brought before the Golden Throne. Few are aware of the significance of this symbol in Sororitas art.